Are you ready for a word? Grab your word and turn with me, if you will, to the book of Judges. Judges chapter 3. And I want to read into your hearing verse 1 through 5. Judges chapter 3, verse 1 through 5. Verse 1 reads as follows: These are the nations the Lord left in order to test Israel. Oh, I'm preaching already. These are the nations the Lord left in order to test Israel, since the Israelites had fought none of these in any of the wars with Canaan. This was to teach the future generations of the Israelites how to fight in battle, especially those who had not fought before. These nations included the 5 rulers of the Philistines and all of the Canaanites and the Sidonians and the Hivites who lived in the Lebanese mountains from Mount Baalhermon as far as the entrance to Hamath. The Lord left them to test Israel, to determine if they would keep the Lord's commands given their father through Moses. Are you going to keep it? Verse 5 says, but they settled. Text says, but they settled among the Canaanites, Hittites, Amorites, Perizzites, Hivites, and Jebusites. But they settled. We are raised by a generation, living in a generation, raising a generation. Raised by a generation, living in a generation, raising a generation. And every generation faces conflict. Every generation faces conflict. My subject matter this morning is fighting what's left. You can take your seats. Fighting what's left. Help me, Holy Ghost. Let's get to it. Confrontation provides a proving ground. Y'all all right? The Lord left certain cultures. Now, I know the text says nations, but I want to get into your mind that the Lord left certain cultures to test Israel. We must understand sometimes we have to fight entities that our predecessors never encountered. Sometimes we have to fight entities that our predecessors never encountered. We're in an age now where everybody wants to identify with something or have somebody or a group of people identify with them. Am I right about it? Either we want, and there's nothing wrong or wicked or twisted with this in and of itself, the desire to want to identify with somebody and to have somebody to identify with you. But sometimes the problem with identifying with certain groups is sometimes once we find or we think that we find our identity, we begin to close off other cultures. And that too has its place. But when we begin to close off people that don't look like us, they don't sound like us, they don't walk like us, but they are us. Because it's easy to see racial divides. It's easy to see even style divides. Makes sense? Language barriers, if you would. It's easy to see those kind of barriers, but one of the barriers that we really got to get past as a people is the generation thing. I come from a generation, in a generation, raising a generation, and what we do, we will isolate ourselves to the generation, not necessarily that we're in, but the generation that we identify with. Did you hear what I'm saying? Not necessarily the one that you're in, but the one that you identify with. And so once we do things like that, we begin to separate ourselves from other people sometimes. And so we'll be like, well, I can't get with them seasoned folks. I won't call y'all old. I can't get with them seasoned folks. They don't understand where I'm coming from. Where you came from, them seasoned folks. And then we have this whole thing now, and I don't even think people realize the block of time that millennial even encompasses. Because some people talk about these millennials, and your birthday will put you right in that generation. But I told you that the generation that we're in is not necessarily the one that we identify ourselves with. Does that make sense? So we'll be in a generation that we identify with, looking at another generation like they don't know what's going on and they don't know what I'm going through. I'll make the connection in a little while. So a quick side note, and it really is connected to what we're talking about here, is comparison. The comparison culture has infiltrated our society. Does that make sense? I said it's infiltrated our society. Now, the thing about comparison is comparison invites contention. Comparison, by its very nature, the minute that you start comparing, somebody's going to fight for their... Never mind. I begin to get a little disgusted even with things that were happening and something that's not necessarily important, because what the people were comparing, when you get down to it, isn't all that important. But that wasn't the issue, because I was like, I see the root of that thing. The topic, get it? The topic wasn't the issue, it was the root of it. It was the root of it. And the mindset that comes with it when you start comparing everything. We don't even appreciate greatness because we have to make somebody greater than the next. Does that make sense? So we're in this comparison infiltrated society, and it's inviting contention, and it conceives an enemy of our own creation. That's what comparison does. Comparison conceives an enemy of our own creation. The minute that you start comparing, you've now created an enemy. Because here's the thing, even if you're not comparing yourself to another person, we start comparing different philosophies. And now we create an enemy philosophy. So now we become embattled with a battle that we're not even supposed to be in. We're picking a fight that we created. It's crazy enough that you're going to have to deal with confrontation. You're going to have to deal with conflict anyway. The minute that we are born into, matter of fact, the way that we get to this world is through conflict. Now, I don't want to get too graphic with it, but you understand that you had to fight just to get in your mother's womb. And when you came out, you were already fighting with elements that you had never been a part of before. It was a fight to get your first breath out because you wasn't breathing air, you were breathing fluid. Does that make sense? So we're born literally and figuratively in conflict. So you've got enough to deal with already. Why would somebody in their rational mind create another conflict? And this is what we do. We conceive enemies of our own creation. So let alone that the enemy is after you. Make no mistakes about it. And you will have some people that quote unquote hate on you, and those people are going to be after you. There's going to be some things that you're going to have to deal with in life that really will better you, or to prove certain things, and we'll get to that, to prove certain things, and you're going to have to deal with that already. So why, having to deal with the amount of conflict that you already have to deal with, why do we create additional conflict with comparisons? Whose church is the best? Whose pastor is the best? We even have best friends. I'm talking about the mentality now. Who said it best? Who wore it best? Comparison, 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 comparison. Well, my sin isn't bad as your sin. Comparison. My section is better than your comparison. And so we create these enemies. And somebody that might be listening saying it ain't that serious. Oh, but you don't understand the root of it. Because we become so contentious that we start fighting against everything. We even fight against wisdom. We even fight against love. I'm talking about pure, real love. We'll fight against it. Now, another annotation here is that we have to understand about the nature of conflict, because we're dealing with conflict, and we're dealing with the fact that the truth that confrontation provides a proven ground is that when we're dealing with generations, because again, we come from a generation, in a generation, raising a generation, and when we realize this, is that though we want to stay away from comparisons, we're going to hear them. But what we need to realize in contention and in conflict is that past tactics won yesterday's battles. I'm going to say it one more time. Past tactics won yesterday's battles. So I can't come from my generation into a new generation comparing what I went through with what they're going through. Oh my goodness. I can't compare what I went through. Baby, you going through the same thing that I went through. No. In fact, I'm not. So I can't bring the battles and the things that I faced, and they were earnest fights, and they were hard fights, and you may have had triumph and victory, but I can't bring that to this kind of conversation. Does everybody help me? Everybody hear what I'm saying? I can't. That's not going to help the situation. I can't bring that victory to this moment, because that was yesterday's tactics. And what you did yesterday may not work today. Matter of fact, it won't work today, because you're going to have to deal with what's in front of you. Now, nevertheless, lessons learned are enduring. So the thing about it is, instead of saying, well, I went through the same thing that you're going through, here's what I learned when I went through my conflict. Does that make sense? When I went through my conflict, this is what I learned, and maybe things that I learned might help you. Not what I did, what I learned. I don't think that you heard what I said, church. Not what I did, what I learned. What I learned was this. What I learned when I was really down and I thought that nobody was going to be on my side, that God was always standing in the background waiting for me to call upon him. And when I did that, that is the moment that I began to progress towards victory. I don't know what's going to make you call on the name of the Lord. I don't know, but I know that when I went there, that's what I learned. I learned that even though it seemed like I had so many casualties around me and I thought it was the end, yet here I stand today breathing and ministering to you. So I know you feel like you're at the end of your rope. I just want to talk to somebody real quick. I know that you might feel like you're at the end of your rope. You may feel like everything, it's like everywhere I go, there's casualties all around me. I'm losing friends. I'm losing this. I'm losing that. I'm losing my mind. But you're still here. So God has purpose for you. Just because you face a deficit does not mean that you will face defeat. Or you will not experience defeat. Does that get it? Because just because I'm behind a little bit doesn't mean that I can overcome what seems insurmountable. Is everybody with me, somebody? So what we must recognize, or what we must realize, is the battle of the ages is already here. The battle of the ages is already here. Get this, our predecessors are not to blame for every battle that we face. Because sometimes we get angry because we know that we have to deal with conflict. We've come mature enough to say, I understand I got to deal with conflict. All right, I came into a world. I had to fight my way in. I have to fight my way through. I get it. I'm all right with that. But what we'll begin to do then sometimes is play the blame game and be like, I only got to go through this because my daddy wasn't no good. And I have to go through this because my family wasn't never nothing. We never had nothing. We never had nothing. And so every time, sometimes when we get into these conflicts, we start bringing blame into the situation. And we have to realize that sometimes our predecessors had nothing to do with the conflicts that we have to face. Does that make sense? Well, why didn't you take care of that before I got here? Nobody wants to be born into poverty. No. I would think not. Nobody wants to be born into poverty, but that's the position that we're born into. And because we're born into poverty, well, it must be our folks' fault. It must be their fault. It must be their fault that we were born. No, maybe it had nothing to do with them. Does that make sense? And so our process is not to blame for every battle that we face. Sometimes we're not fighting a curse. Sometimes we're just fighting what's left. Oh, I hope I'm talking to somebody. I said, sometimes you're not fighting a curse. Everything that happens to us, especially when we start seeing tendencies. Because they had fought Canaan, but not this set of Canaanites. Oh my goodness. They had this thing with Canaan, but they hadn't faced this group of Canaanites, and we say, oh my goodness, I have to deal with this struggle, and I have to deal with this fight, and it must be their fault. And since they didn't take care of it, now you're starting to think that you're dealing with a generational curse. And because you see tendencies, well, they had to deal with Canaanites, and now I got to deal with Canaanites. But that set of Canaanites ain't even this set of Canaanites. Anybody see what I'm saying? You're thinking that you're fighting the same thing because we call it by the same name. Or it even comes from the same culture. But it's not the same thing. I hope I'm intriguing you a little bit. I hope I got your mind a little bit to see what I'm trying to say here. Because we'll say everything that happens to us, like I said, when we see a tendency, we'll call it a curse. Oh, it's a curse. It's a curse. Oh, that's just my family. No, baby, that's what's left. Some of the conflict that we face is what God left to prove us. You don't have to receive it, but if you do, it'll help you out. Huh? He sent these coaches to test them, and they blame, and sometimes we blame our predecessors. But let it be known, ladies and gentlemen, let it be known that blame may divert attention. However, it won't relieve us of our responsibilities. I'm going to say it one more time. Blame may divert attention, but it won't relieve our responsibilities. And so what we like to do sometimes when we have to deal with stuff, because we don't really, even though we understand conflict and we deal with conflict, we don't like dealing with conflict. Most of us want to live in peace, right? Like I just want my peace. That's all I want. I just want peace in my life. I don't have to have stuff. I don't have to have things. Just give me some peace in my life. I'll be all right. So most of us don't want confrontation. And so when confrontation comes around, we don't want to deal with it, so we want somebody else to have to fight it. And so what we'll do with confrontations that we're supposed to be in is we'll blame somebody else, thinking that they're going to fight our battles. Baby, let me help you one quick. Nobody's going to fight your battles but the Lord. And even when he's fighting your battles, you're going to have to put forth the effort. Hello, somebody. You are not going to sit down and be like, God, do it. Every time. God going to be like, no, you do it. I'm here with you, but you're going to have to do it. Does that make sense to everybody? So, again, blame doesn't do anything. Oh, I blame them. I blame mama them for this addiction that I got. That wasn't mama even fault. That was left for you. But it was here before I got here. Exactly. It was left. I don't know if I'm talking to anybody this morning. It was left for you. Now, furthermore, conflict determines the strength of our faith. If we never had any conflict, our faith would be very, very weak because we just believe that everything was supposed to always be fine and dandy and good and nothing ever troublesome was supposed to happen to us. If you did not have conflict, your witness would be weak. Because somebody's going to have to deal with conflict in their life. And somebody going to come to you looking for answers because you look like you got peace in your life. But now you got no witness. Oh, everything's always good for me. Always? You ain't never had to go through nothing? No. No, everything's always been good for me. I just, the Lord just protects me. He's round about me and nothing ever. Who you helping? You ain't never, a lot of people tell you straight to your face, if you ain't never been through nothing, you can't even talk to me. Because the way that you approach me is going to be different. I'm going to be sitting up here like, man, I'm in war. And you're going to be like, I don't understand the warfare. What you doing all that fighting for? Why are you fighting? I'm fighting because I have to. Because this was left for me. So again, now what conflict does, it determines the strength of our faith, amen? So, because one or two things is going to happen with conflict for the believer. Faith is going to be forged or doubt is going to develop. One of the two. It's going to forge your faith or doubt is going to develop. One or two. So, when you're in conflict, it's very easy to start doubting because sometimes when we're in conflict, it looks as though we're losing. And truth be told, sometimes we are losing. Anybody can recognize that they've been in a battle sometimes, and sometimes you was losing. You was fighting with all your effort, but you were losing. And sometimes God will let us lose just enough of us so that he can fight for us. He's like, I'm really waiting for you to lose yourself so that you have to depend upon me. Because who are you going to depend upon? Who are we going to depend upon when we're losing? Because it's easy to depend on God when you're winning. Saw the draft the other day. Everybody that got drafted, they spiritual right now, boy. They spiritual. Oh, you was handing me a check that big, I'd be, glory to God. Yes. I'd have a Nikkei praise. Some of y'all will get that. That's a victory praise. It's Nike. Never mind. I'll just do it, God. I'll just do it. It's easy to praise when you're winning. It's easy to praise when everything's going right. Can you praise when it's not going the way you saw it? Can you praise when things are tough, when things are difficult? That makes sense to everybody? Praise can't be conditional. It can't be predicated on your position. We talked about that. Amen? So, I can't develop doubt just because I'm in a conflict. I cannot do it. So, this is another point kind of hanging off that is that doubt sets itself against action and attempt. Do you understand what I'm saying? That doubt sets itself against action and attempt. Not only will you doubt what you are doing, you'll start doubting what you should be doing. Doubt will make you stagnant because it will freeze your momentum, because you'll start questioning your motives. You'll start questioning this process that we have to go through. How many can be honest with me? You ain't got to raise your hand, but you can nod your head. You can just say, in your spirit, that when we've been going through something and it wasn't going our way, we stopped making the effort. Anybody quit in the middle? Anybody quit? You didn't even know that every step that you were making was a process that God was having you go through to prove you. And all you needed was one more piece. All you needed was one more piece. But because that piece was a little further than you thought it should be, you missed it and you stopped. And some of us can be honest. I don't want you to go back there because I don't want to make your mind go the wrong way. Some of us can admit right now, it's like, man, I wish I wouldn't have missed that. I wish I would have kept going that one time. Anybody got that can be honest with me? I wish I would have kept going that one. There's this one time I should have kept going. But you didn't. Why? Because doubt kept in. And again, it'll stop you in your action and even your attempt. Am I helping anybody today? And so we cannot settle. We cannot settle. The text says, but they settled. So the text says that God left these nations. These are the nations God left in order to test Israel. I left you these nations because you're going to have to learn how to fight. So God has left cultures around you. I hope you hear me today. That God has left cultures around us to teach us how to fight. See, we want to just stay closed in within ourselves, and then we say, okay, well, I don't understand why I have to battle against this philosophy and this culture and that culture. I left that for you to prove your faith, to build your most holy faith. Is that helping anybody? We cannot settle. Look at somebody say, we cannot settle. We cannot settle with the enemy. We cannot settle with the enemy. We cannot settle for the enemy. Amen? And I want to say this here, and this really got me, that every culture wants to survive. I don't think that you're hearing me, church. I said every culture wants to survive. And this is why we can't settle with them. God will say, I need you to go through this conflict to prove your faith, but you can't settle with this culture. Because every culture wants to survive. The reason why he was keeping them from marrying other cultures, because every culture wants to survive. And so they're going to fight for their existence. Do you understand? That's why we ought not get married and we're unequally yoked, because every culture wants to survive. The yoked culture wants to survive, and the unyoked culture wants to survive. That's why he said, don't be unevenly yoked. It would be better for y'all to be non-believers and get there together than to sit there and be trying to, because you don't know who's going to pull who which way. Oh, I got faith in God. Now you got just horrible addictions. You don't go to church no more because you always got a headache. Dealing with them. Trying to encourage them. They weighing you down. But you ain't checked with God about nothing. God was like, no, I put that culture around you to prove you. There's some people now, I need some real people in here that's done, you didn't marry your first date. Or you didn't marry your first time. I'm just want to be real with some people. You understand what I'm saying? Because it's like I didn't deal with that because God stopped me from going down that road, and I'm glad about it. Now, I made the mistake of getting in that situation, but I could not settle with that. I cannot settle there. I cannot get myself involved in this thing, because if I get involved with this culture, if I tie myself with this culture, then I might become a part of that culture. And I cannot mix all these cultures. And I ain't talking about race and nothing like that, so I'll dismiss that whole thing. I'm talking about the culture of sin. See, what happened was with all these other nations that they served and they worshiped idols. And he's telling you, look, I know that you think that she fine. I know that you say, oh boy, is fine, but they're going to bring an idol in your house. And you going to say, well, I don't serve that idol, so there ain't no problems. But the problem is that the idol is in your house. And what you're going to try to do, and one of the things that David faced was trying to make all them women happy. Trying to make, okay, well, let me make this one happen. Well, I ain't gonna bow to the idol, but I'll wink at it. Because I want to make her happy. So you wink. Now the wink becomes closed eyes. Now closed eyes becomes just a little prayer. See, it wasn't, you didn't jump on your face immediately. You did it one step at a time. I told you it's a process. Does that make sense to everybody? So we cannot settle. These cultures won't survive. And we must understand that relationships affect faith. Hello, somebody? Relationships affect faith. If you have saved parents that really was about the love of God, it's often easy for us to now acquiesce to church, because we see not perfect people, but people really trying to do and live for God. It was easier for me to come to church because I had a good example with my parents. I did not say that they were perfect. I'm just saying that they showed a good example. All right? Of how to remain married and how to be faithful to one another and how to be faithful to the church and how to serve somebody else. I had those examples, so it was easy for me. That relationship helped me with faith, with my faith. Now, just as easy as relationships can help you, they can also harm you. Because now if you see the same thing, somebody going to church, but they ain't really about that life, it makes you start questioning it. Is that really real? Because you don't have a relationship yourself. Or you're trying to build a relationship for yourself. Anybody been in a relationship with somebody, but somebody started talking about that other somebody, and because you didn't know them like that, you started believing in one person you thought you knew? Some of us have cut off relationships because somebody said something about somebody else that we never even knew. We never even discovered. Well, if I were you, I found out it was funny. I was thinking about it. I was chasing a girl, chasing a girl in middle school, chasing her. I'm going to get me one. So I was chasing her. And I finally got enough courage to do, back in middle school. This is before cell phones and all that stuff, ladies and gentlemen. So, I'm telling my age a little bit. Back in the day, we couldn't DM nobody. We wasn't in nobody, we couldn't direct message people. We had to write notes. Yes. And we used to write in cursive too, but that's a whole nother story. So, So we would write our little note. Everybody go back with me. Yes, no, maybe. No, nobody. Okay, that wasn't nobody. No, yeah. Okay. I just want some real people. Yes, no, maybe. So I wrote one of those yes, no, maybe things, and that was good too, because my mom and them had a rose garden. I went outside, cut me 2 roses, took all the thorns off. Oh yes. Got my little letter together. Put it on her desk, because she wasn't in my same class. Put it on her desk, had a little note. Yeah. She came back. Yeah, cool. I'm like, what? What? Say word. I was happy as all I know. You couldn't tell me nothing. And in between periods, it's only like 6 minutes. So I only had about 6-minute praise. Bell rung, I had to sit back down at my desk. I'm telling y'all this for a reason. I sat back down at my desk. I don't even think I paid attention that whole class, because I just couldn't wait till that bell rung. You hear me? You hear what I'm saying? That girl said, yeah, she way out my league. At least that's what I thought. Right? And I came out, and I know a class. I'm at the door of the class. You hear me? I ain't never went to somebody else's class that quick. I'm at the door. And she come out, walk right past me. I'm like, what? No, what? And her friend comes up to me. And she says she changed her mind. Oh, I will hurt y'all. Her friend, she said she changed her mind. I was like, what happened? Now we're going to fast forward for the sake of time. Here I am now in high school. And her friend tells me, you know I always liked you, right? So I found out the story was the reason why the girl changed her mind because she changed her mind. Oh, there was always a moral to the story. It wasn't just, I was giving you a little bit of my life to make you think. Like, hold on, wait a minute. So you mean to tell me that she was thinking I was a no good so-and-so? You know, you done convict. Now, everything about me, man, please, I was a little crazy back in the day, but I was always a gentleman. I done dropped the roses, and that wasn't the first time I had done that. I had did it for like a month straight, like about every other day or so. It's coming. You just don't even know. You don't. Yes, I was doing this as a little boy. I don't know what was wrong with me. I don't. You know? But all this time I'm seeing, and when she said yes, I was surprised because I thought she was out of my league. And then she changed her mind over the course of 45 minutes because somebody told her that I wasn't for her. Now, you know, years past, thank you, Lord, that I wasn't for her. No, I wasn't. No, I wasn't. No, I wasn't for your baby. No, I wasn't. Thank you, God, I wasn't for you. But I was upset at the time. And I was upset more so than the girl changing her mind is that somebody defamed my character. Huh? Somebody said something about me that wasn't true because they wanted that position. So sometimes people are telling you about relationships that you shouldn't have because they want the position. Oh, you shouldn't, because I don't want y'all to go too far back there, but my daddy know what I'm talking about. Oh, y'all shouldn't mess with them. Y'all shouldn't mess with them. Why? They never did nothing to me. You'll find out. Oh, and boy, did we. I'll leave that right where it is. But do you see what I'm saying? So we got to understand that relationships affect faith. So how I'm connected to people will affect how I relate to God. Because if I have so-called church people telling me bad things about other people in church, then why in the world would I get up on a Saturday, Sunday morning to come to church to sit with all these people that's so wrong? What sense does that make? Huh? Oh, everybody at the church just backwards. My thing is why you still go there. They just hurt me or whatever have you. And now you telling everybody they ain't never even been to church. I ain't going to church neither. But again, so relationships affect faith. So what God is saying here, to bring us back to what we were talking about, what God is saying here is like, look, I don't even want you involved with them people. Because them the people you're going to have to fight against. That mentality, more so than fisticuffs, that mentality is what you're going to have to fight. So why are you going to settle for a mentality that you're in conflict with? Let me say it one more time. Why are you going to settle for a mentality that you're in conflict with? Is this helping anybody? Now follow me here. The battle cry must continue. Because we've been talking about conflict and we've been talking about generations and how we bridge the gap between these generations, because there's a generation that's already had to fight. They've got experience, they've got knowledge, and they got lessons learned. And they can tell us the things that they used to do that helped them get past. Now I can't line fight anymore. Y'all understand what I'm saying? We don't fight like that anymore in warfare. We don't line up, stand tall. We don't put on, loud. We don't put on suits with, big things coming out of our head and, whatever, have your head dresses and things like that and march straight into fire. We don't fight that way anymore. You understand? That kind of conventional warfare, your side fight my side and we're going to see who the better one. They They don't fight like that no more. All right? So people don't just square off in front of each other and walk like this. I told her, I said, Lord, you knew what you was doing bringing me into this dispensation, because I would have been like, call me a coward. I ain't walking in the fire, buddy. You all crazy. Them cannonballs. You think my body going to stop a cannonball? But again, I can say that because I live in this generation. But if I came from that generation, that thought would have never crossed my mind, because I would have accepted that bravery was walking into fire. This generation says, I ain't walking in the fire. I'll fight. But I'm not walking into, you crazy. Cannon fire? So again, but what are the lessons learned? We won the victory, right? But we don't fight like that anymore. I don't think that you heard what I just said, church. We won the victory, but we don't fight like that anymore. But we can still win because we can have a heart after God. We can still win because we have a heart of courage. And courage doesn't mean to give my life senselessly. It means to, again, just when the situation approaches, I need to make sure that I'm in it. Does it make sense? Because at some point, I am going to have to come face to face with my enemy. I'm going to say it one more time. At some point in time, I'm going to have to come face to face with my enemy, and I can't back down. But I'm sure not going to walk up to him while he's shooting cannons at me. You understand what I'm saying? No, I'm going to find a way to get in position to either get him or, to where we can have the equal advantage. We can have equal standing or something. I'm not walking in the cannon. That's crazy. You understand what I'm saying? So the battle cry must continue. The battle cry must continue. The Israelites cried out to the Lord. So the Lord, this is verse 9 in the same chapter. The Israelites cried out to God because what happened was they had, again, God was like, look, I told you I left these nations to prove you so that future generations can learn how to fight. That's what the text says. This is why I brought you to, because they're just coming off of Joshua. So here's the thing about it is, right, and I'm saying what I'm saying because we get hyped about Joshua's generation, but there's a generation that has to come after Joshua. Because everybody defames Moses' generation. That ain't the way. Moses never made it to the promised land. Right? Ain't that what we do in church? Comparison. Ain't that what we do in church? Moses didn't make it to the promised land. Joshua did. What happened after Joshua? Moses' sons, his natural sons, did not carry his legacy. His spiritual son did. Joshua's sons did not carry his legacy. His spiritual connections did. Does that make sense? So verse 9 says, the Israelites cried out to the Lord, so the Lord raised up Othniel, the son of Kenaz, Caleb's younger brother. So hold on, Caleb. We don't talk about Caleb. We talk about Joshua. We don't talk about Caleb. We talk about Joshua. Love Joshua. Talk about Joshua all the time. But it was Caleb's younger brother's son? Huh? It was the son of Caleb's brother. Not Joshua's son. Not Caleb's son. Caleb's brother's son. That was the connection. Does that make sense? Somebody say, I have a connection. But the battle cry must continue. The Israelites cried out to the Lord, so the Lord raised up Othniel, the son of Kenaz, and Caleb's younger brother, as a deliverer to save the Israelites. Now, he wound up defeating the king of Aram, who the Israelites had served 8 years. And the text says afterwards there was peace for 40 years. Who could do something with 40 years of peace? Let me ask the church something. What could you do with 40 years? Some of us want 4 minutes of peace. Am I talking to anybody in the church? If I can get 40 minutes of peace, when you get home, you got a bunch of children and grandchildren running around. I just give me 40 minutes of peace and I'll be all right. 4 hours of peace, 4 days, 4 months, 40 years. I need you to ask yourself a question. I'm almost out your way. What would you do with 40 years of peace? And I want to ask you another question. What would you do for 40 years of peace. The conduit to conquest is not confined in our natural ancestry, so we don't have to come from Moses. Hello, somebody. We don't have to come from Joshua. Hello, somebody. We don't have to come from Caleb. But we can learn lessons from them. I can learn lessons from Moses. I can learn that when God says do something, I need to do immediately and exactly and sincerely the way that he told me to do it. If he says speak to the rock, I better open up my mouth and start talking instead of swinging. See, sometimes you think that you got to always swing in a fight, and sometimes God just say open your mouth. Oh, I'm ready to swing. Yeah, but I don't need you to swing right now. Just talk. Does that make sense? So the conduit, it doesn't always come through our ancestry. Instead, our connection to triumph comes from the earnestness of our cry. What if I told you every victory in God comes from a cry? That victory in Jesus comes from a cry. Victory in God comes from a cry. We say, my soul cries out, hallelujah, I thank God for saving me. You didn't catch it? My soul cries out, hallelujah, I think your cry is what saved you. How many people cried they were into salvation? Now, I told you my testimony, I did not cry. I just made a decision. But I had sure cried in salvation. You hear me? God saved me. God delivered me. God helped my mind. So if you don't cry to it, you will cry in it. Am I talking to anybody? Don't wait to cry. Does that make sense? Now, the victories come from the cry, but we don't have to wait to the cry. We don't always have, because this particular cry came because they were disobedient. Because there's the battle cry, and there's I'm sorry cry. Lord, you know what I'm saying? That's the rescue me cry. That's the pull me up out of my mistakes cry. Anybody had one of them cries? Pull me out of my mistakes. So don't wait for those cries. Your cries need to become continuous, but not that kind of cry. Does that make sense? Your battle cry must continue, but not your cry for, not your cry from your guilt. They were crying out of guilt, but God still raised up. Say he raised up Othniel. Don't wait to cry. This is your last word. The climb to conquest is contentious. The climb to conquest is contentious, and retaining it will demand further challenges. Say one more time. The climb to conquest is contentious, and retaining it will demand further challenges. So, we come from a generation. We're in a generation, living in a generation, raising in a generation. So how do we bridge the gap between these generations? How do we make sure that we don't have a fall off after Joshua? How do we not blame our predecessors for the battles that God left for us? How do we learn from our predecessors, though what they did specifically may not work, but what they learned will work? What did they learn to do? They learned to depend on Jesus. Can we learn to depend on God? Can we learn that we don't have to keep slipping in sin to cry out to God? I don't have to be in sin to cry out to God. Does anybody in this church hear me? Because I'm going to have to fight what's left. There's some things that God left here for me to deal with. And I've got to take the things that my predecessors learned, and I got to utilize that, and I got to instill them into those that are coming after me, because I don't want a gap between me and my son. because he's going to have to fight what's left. I've got some stuff that I've got to battle in my lifetime. And I don't want to leave no enemies for my children. Is that anybody's prayer? I'm not leaving enemies for my children because they're already going to have to fight what's left. So I'm going to do what God told me to do. If God says kill them all, I'm not going to settle with the cultures that I've allowed to live with me. I can't settle with them. I can't settle with this culture of comparison. I can't settle with it. I can't settle for it. I can't settle with this culture of everything needs to be awarded. I can't settle with this society of inclusion. I'm sorry, I can't do it. No, there are standards that we have to live by. You ain't got to like it. You ain't got to like it, but there's a standard that the people of God need to hold close, and we need to embody, and we need to exemplify. And what the word was really telling me here, and I'm out your way, is that we're causing gaps in our generation because somewhere, somehow, we forgot how to fight. We forgot how to fight because we want to blame it on somebody else. We don't want to fight. We want to blame. You want to fight for your position. You want to blame. We want to blame. We don't want to battle for anything. We want it to be given to us. We don't want to earn anything. We just want to expect everything. And we want to blame it on some folks. We want to blame it on our predecessors, and then sometimes we even want to blame it on our progenies. We want to blame it on our offspring. It's the young folks that's causing all these problems. Who raised these young folks? I keep telling y'all, some of us talking about millennials, and you are millennial. By your age bracket. You was born after 77, you a millennial, so I hate to tell you. That's your age bracket. That's me not. I don't identify with that. Doesn't matter what you identify with. I'm telling you what you are. It makes sense? So we keep blaming because we want to push it off because, again, we want peace, and we're going about it in the wrong way. We think peace comes by blaming. We think peace comes by diversion, because that's what blame is diversion. Oh, no, that ain't me, that's you. Oh, no, that ain't me, that's them. It ain't my fault ain't my fault, it's their fault. No, it's nobody's fault. It's just what's left. And it's left for you to deal with. Anybody gonna deal with this culture that conflicts with God? Your cry has to continue. Not a cry out of guilt, but a cry out of yielding, a cry out of earnestness, a cry out of desire for God, so I can fight what's left. Give God praise right there.